They made me change in front of 3 male officers in a room with the door shut.
Oh, wow.
And I was very uncomfortable with that because I have had sexual assault in my past. It was awful. It was one of the most humiliating things I had ever been through. There needs to be like 1,000 times more accountability for officers. Body cams should not be allowed to be turned off on a call. I believe that body cams should be on the entire time an officer is on duty, regardless of if they're responding to a call or not. I was pretty nervous, but at the same time, this man has gotten people off of death row. And then about a week later is when he called me and told me that they had turned up the charges from just felony possession to felony trafficking of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute to minors within a school zone.
So they just made all these allegations up with respect to, I guess, because you were next door to a school?
Right, we were next door to a school, and everything moved so fast. Most people, you hear their legal battles take months to years. This was over in 3 months.
Total from start to finish?
From start to finish, 3 months.
18 years as a lawyer, I have never seen a felony case anyway be over in 3 months.
But then I met him, and I was like, he doesn't deserve to die for a mistake he made when he was 19. Like,
19?
yes.
Welcome to the Iron Gavel. I'm Chris Washington, a criminal defense attorney with over 17 years of experience, and today we explore a gripping tale of justice, a story where our hero faced seemingly insurmountable odds but emerged stronger through a strategic defense. Let's uncover the truth together. Our hero, Madison Patel, found herself entangled in a complex drug case which carried a potential sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison. Wrongly accused, her world turned upside down overnight. The stakes were incredibly high, and we will show you step by step how the situation unfolded. But first, let's learn a little bit about our hero. All right, Madison, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
I am 28. I live in Alabama, and I have kind of a wild history. I grew up as a preacher's child, and there was a lot of child abuse, emotional abuse, religious abuse. And when I went to college, I kind of, went wild, as kids do. But I took it a little further than most and got wrapped up in a bunch of things I wasn't supposed to. And it's taken me up until really about 5 years ago to actually get my life fixed and back on track. At this point, I was working as a receptionist and secretary for a while, but at this point, I am the full-time caregiver for my grandmother during her final stages of life.
How would you say your childhood helped you develop into the person you are today?
A lot of people look at abuse in a lot of different ways, but I chose to view it as a stepping stone that made me who I am. I came out of the home I was raised in and out of my legal issues and my substance abuse challenges with a different perspective, I think. I decided to use it to turn the page and, break the cycles, move on, do better. I think that's kind of set this mindset for me of like always improving, always getting better.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's not an easy thing for you to talk about.
It is what it is. I can't go back and undo it. So I've just tried to learn from the experiences that I had as a child and break the cycle moving forward.
You say you work as a full time caregiver for your grandmother.
Yes, my grandmother is 78 years old. She has a lot of health issues. And in June of last year, she fell sick and she almost passed away. But thankfully, she survived. But she came out of it requiring a full time live in caregiver. She's bedbound and can no longer really tend to herself. She's still happy and doing well, but she just can't take care of her basic needs. But she is my best bud. We live together and we take care of the bills together. And when she fell sick, my husband actually told me to come down here and live with her. We lived about 2 hours away. He told me that I was needed more down here and he sent me down here to take care of Grandma.
I think that makes him a good husband.
It really does.
You know, as men, we don't like our women to leave us, no matter how tough we try to be.
He definitely told me there was an adjustment period for him, but we're both very independent people. He works so much that I actually see him more regularly now than I did when I was living in the same house as him because we don't have conflicting work schedules anymore.
What kind of work does he do?
He is a manager of a convenience store. His family owns several convenience stores and he manages multiple of them. He is an Indian immigrant, actually.
Indian from India?
Yes, from India.
Okay. Well, I will say this. I can certainly relate to you on the grandmother story. My mom's house or trailer, two-bedroom trailer, was directly behind my grandmother's house. You know, I just remember being at my grandmother's house all the time because it was like you walk outside, her house was right there. Once I started high school, I basically went live with my grandmother
Okay.
full time. She really needed my assistance. She actually passed away my senior year of high school. But I remember, like, I never considered myself her caregiver. I do remember, like, I would do all sorts of things for her, and she would always give me $20 or $10, and she would always say, "This is not pay. This is appreciation. I can't afford to pay you, but I'm giving you a few dollars to show you I appreciate you." So she was in her room, and towards like the very end of her life, I would just sleep in the bed with her because most times she would be in her room, I'd be in my room. I would hear her calling for me in the middle of the night. So I would get up, go to her room. I would have to physically pick her up and carry her to the bathroom or roll her over from side to side in the bed so she wouldn't get bed sores. And then towards the end, because I would be in school, I'd be tired and going to sleep in class. But towards the end, I just started sleeping in the bed with her at night. So if she needed me, I was right there.
That's sweet.
I say when we do that, that definitely makes us stronger and it makes us appreciate, health. How if we're in bad health, it's really tough.
Absolutely.
So let's shift focus now and talk about what we're here to really, really talk about today. Why do you think this topic, your case, is important for the public to know about?
Because the number one thing you can do if you get arrested is to sit down and shut your mouth. My case is a lesson in staying quiet and not saying anything, just keeping your mouth shut.
Is that what you did?
Pretty much. I sat back and I listened to my lawyer who told me to, quote, sit down, shut the hell up, and I'll take care of it.
That sounds like a good lawyer.
And I did exactly what he said. He told me what to say and when to say it, and he took care of it.
If you had to give one piece of advice to the audience today, it sounds like you would tell them be quiet and let your lawyer handle it, right?
Absolutely.
Your lawyer probably told you have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. That's our constitutional right. But in everyday terms, you would just say, just shut the hell up and let your lawyer lead it, right?
Just let him or her take point and just let them do their magic.
So let me ask you this. What's something about you that people might not know but would find interesting?
It would have to be my substance abuse history. I was a very high functioning addict and I never really let on to many people other than those that were interacting with me every single day and doing drugs with me that I was an addict. It wasn't until I got arrested actually that I started the process of getting clean, and it really changed my whole life. Heroin and pharmaceuticals.
Well, you look great now.
Thank
I,
you.
I've had family members deal with substance abuse, so I can understand how, when people are addicted to drugs, I always say they want drugs like I want water, or they need drugs like I need to have sex. It feels like a real need.
It
And
really
we
does.
really need to help people who are addicted to drugs. not criminalize them and do all these other things we do to them.
Definitely. And that was something that was very eye opening for me. Drugs have kind of always been a part of my life. Both of my parents were addicted to pharmaceuticals growing up. My mother illegally, and my father was prescribed them. So I remember taking my first pain pill when I was like 7 years old. It just was always a part of my life from then on up until after I got arrested. I quit heroin, but it took me another couple years to fully kick the pharmaceuticals. It really was all consuming. It may not have looked like it from the outside, but it was eating me alive. And I wish that instead of criminalizing me and, treating me like an addict, people had tried to help me get well rather than hanging me out to dry to do it on my own.
Who would you say, if you had to name a person or more than one person, was the biggest influence in your journey to get clean and stay clean?
Honestly, it was myself. Everybody in my family was addicted to pharmaceuticals at the time. I didn't really have anyone that I could lean on. I didn't do NA. I didn't do AA to help with the drinking. I didn't do any of that. I just made a plan and kind of worked through it. And it took me a long time to fully kick everything, but I tried to build healthier habits, get better without the pressure of a program. I didn't really want to get sober at first when I got arrested. I thought it was just a major inconvenience and I'd go back to it later. And my dad gave me a handful of pharmaceuticals and told me that that was it. When I was withdrawing, he said, this is it. This is all you get. Space them out, use them to get through the detox, and then I'm not ever giving you any more. But my mother, on the other hand, kept feeding them to me and giving them to me pretty regularly. It just took me a long time to really make up my mind and decide that, no, I can't do this anymore because if I do, I'm going to die. This all started happening right around the time that fentanyl first came onto the scene. I had friends that just started dropping like flies, and it was really scary, but even that wasn't enough to really deter me. The only thing that deterred me was jail, knowing that if I didn't pass that drug test at the courthouse on my court date, that I was going to prison.
That's a big deterrent for a lot of people. A lot of people, they still don't make it. I would say they're just not strong enough.
I don't know if it's a strong enough thing. I think it's that they have to make up their mind that they want it. Because everybody has that strength within them. Everybody has the strength to overcome anything that they want to overcome. It's a matter of being willing to set your mind to it and to work through it and take it seriously and better yourself. Even when it's hard, even when it's not what you want to do.
That makes a lot of sense. With respect to what you endured, both the abuse, I don't know what kind of abuse it was, but the abuse as well as the drug addictions, what would you say your mission or purpose is with respect to helping others who are in a similar situation that you were in or and are trying to find a way out?
I'm an artist now. I do a lot of like street art, urban art, mural work, stuff like that. I started a podcast myself, and it kind of started out just about the art. But in the last couple months, it has really turned into something completely unexpected. It started with one person coming on and asking if they could talk about recovery. And then now it's kind of like every person that comes on my show is there to talk about their recovery. And, it kind of shifted, and I feel like just spreading awareness that, addiction is everywhere. Not all addicts look like your stereotypical addict. So be kind to everyone, be respectful, just treat everyone like a human being, how you would wish to be treated. And I'm trying to, kind of spread that message and, you know, be the light. I got through it and I'm thriving and I want to see others get through it as well.
I believe that's a noble cause, a noble purpose. Our country, especially, because drug abuse is probably worse here than any other country in the world. Like, I have traveled to Mexico and South America a pretty good amount, and those people don't really use the drugs the way we do. They just send them here and we use them. Let's jump into your case. Tell my audience, give us the backstory leading up to your arrest. What was going on in your life?
So at the time, I was a assistant manager at a Domino's, and I had my own apartment with a couple friends, and there were a couple people that I kind of picked up like strays that are still some of my best friends in the world, but I call them my strays. I picked them up at school, and they didn't really have anyone that they could lean on because they were both from out of state, and they both were really struggling to adjust to college life. So I let them come and crash on my couch and in my living room for a long time. Well, that slowly grew into about 10 people living in my apartment. We all worked together. We all dropped out of college, except for one of us. It started off with us just smoking pot and drinking heavily. And I, of course, was still on the pills at the time. But it really ramped up. That was in 2014. And it really ramped up at the beginning of 2015. So there was this guy dating one of my roommates, and we had this big falling out because I had expressed like not really interest in getting clean, but interest in slowing down to him. And I had asked him if he would, stop bringing me so many pills, all this different stuff because I was trying to back off of it. And he took that personally. So about 6 months before I got arrested is when that falling out happened. I got arrested in September of 2015, so that would have been March when the altercation happened. But I threw him out of my apartment one night after he said some really cruel things to me. And I realized that he had never really been a friend. He was just a drug dealer that lived in my house. So he took the liberty of going to the police and filing a huge false report saying that I was trafficking heroin and fentanyl.
The guy who was supplying you with drugs is the one who reported you to the police?
As far as I know, they told me that an anonymous tip had been filed, and he's the only person I can think of that would have filed it. I haven't spoken to him since that altercation happened. I've seen him like around, and he seems to be thriving and doing great, and I'm happy for him. I'm glad he got sober and took care of business. But it was just very shocking coming from someone that I thought was one of my closest friends to hear the things that came out of his mouth that night come out of his mouth. And I told him, pardon my language, but get the fuck out. I don't ever want to see your fucking face again. You are not my friend. You never have been, and you never will be. He took that very personally. He trashed my apartment on the way out and told me that I would live to regret that until the day I died. So I firmly believe he was the one that reported me.
That argument happened in March of 2015,
Yes, March of 2015.
and then you get arrested in September.
And I got arrested in September. I also need to mention my next door neighbor was a police officer. I know, we were stupid kids. How stupid can you be? He and I were actually really on good terms. He knew I smoked pot. He told me he didn't care that I smoked pot as long as I didn't do it outside where his kids would be exposed to it. He said, just as long as it's not interfering with anyone else and you don't receive any complaints from the apartment complex and they don't tell me to come check on you, I'm not worried about it. I babysat his kids when he and his wife would go on date night. I was really close with them. They were really nice folks. But it just was this huge clusterfuck of things that all went down right around the same time. All that we had in the house was a half ounce of weed, and then I had my IV kit hidden and not much. I think I honestly might have been out of heroin at the time. And then I had all my pills in a Tylenol bottle on my dresser, like a big pill cocktail. When the arrest happened, I was sitting on my couch, half naked. My one roommate had just left, everyone else was at work. The next person that was supposed to come home was my boyfriend. So I was like drinking a bottle of wine, rolling us a blunt, watching a movie, just waiting on him to come in the door, because everybody else was going to be at work till like 2 a.m. and he got home at 6. So I hear keys jingling on the step, and I thought to myself, because this was around 4 o'clock, I thought to myself, wow, he's home early. And then my front door got kicked in.
Oh, they came in full force.
DEA, FBI, ATF.
For little old you who just was a drug user.
Yeah, for me, who was just a user, we did live next door to a high school. Again, we weren't selling pot. My boyfriend would, sell weed occasionally, but it was like to roommates or to like somebody at work, and he would take them like half a gram. It wasn't like he was moving ounces. It was just piddling amounts that, really don't matter. And it wasn't every day or every month. It was like once every 6 months, 8 months. He would take them a gram or two. Well, apparently one night they had been watching us for a while, and he ran out to his friend's car to drop a package, like what I was talking about, like a gram. And they got photos of him making the exchange, and that was grounds enough for them to come into our apartment. They said they had reasonable cause.
I want to go back a little bit because you said something that sparked my interest. The police officer that was your next door neighbor. Tell me, I want to know how y'all's relationship was affected once you were arrested.
He was one of my arresting officers. He was one of the ones that came in, and when everything was going down, he actually is one of the ones that helped me. He pulled me aside at one point and he said, "Whatever you do, don't say a word." And I just kind of looked at him, and then I wasn't going to say anything anyway because I knew to not talk without a lawyer. But he told me not to say anything. After the fact, when I was moving all of my stuff out of my apartment, he was home off duty that day. And he told me that he was very disappointed that it had happened. And he was upset that it was worse than he thought it was. Because, we had a ton of paraphernalia. We were smoking a lot of pot. He thought we were just smoking a joint every now and then. We were buying ounces at a time, but we weren't selling it. We were just smoking it. He told me that when the court date came, that he would do everything he could for me, but that he didn't know if he could do much. Unfortunately, he is one of the officers that lost their jobs as a result of this case. Several officers were reassigned to different precincts, I think is how it was put, because of what happened. There was some shady and underhanded stuff that happened while they were arresting me.
I want to hear all about the shady, illegal activities of the law enforcement officers. But let me ask you one question before that. You said you knew not to talk to the police without a lawyer. Most people don't know that. How did you know that?
I watched a lot of crime shows growing up, and I don't know. I don't want to say I'm smart because in this story I was pretty stupid, but I am pretty smart,
Smart people do stupid things all the time.
I don't really trust the police. I have some other law enforcement stories that I could share for maybe another time. I just was not willing to speak to a police officer. If I get into any kind of trouble at this point, if I'm bleeding out on the floor, I will crawl to the hospital before I call 911. I don't trust the police. I don't trust law enforcement after some of the things I've experienced.
Tell me about the underhanded stuff that occurred in your case.
When they kicked in my door and all that, they brought in drug dogs, whole 9 yards. They collected about 200 pieces of paraphernalia. Now, they did not actually get 200 items, 200 charges of paraphernalia. They charged every single rolling paper separately. They charged every single lighter as its own charge. Even like the big long torch lighters that you use to like light a grill. They charged those as paraphernalia charges. Really, the biggest thing that helped me win my case was that when the officers collected all the evidence, I had taken a forensics class in high school, so I knew a little bit about like the evidence chain of custody and stuff like that. When they collected the evidence, they did not photograph it. They took 0 pictures inside my apartment until they had taken everything out. And then the officer that lived next door to me made a comment with his body cam on. He switched his body cam on and made the comment, "Hey, we didn't photograph the evidence before we took it out of here." When they brought it back in, they brought in all sorts of stuff that was not mine.
That's just dirty.
It was. They brought in like crack pipes, all sorts of stuff. And at the time, the only I say the only hard drug as if, it excuses it, but really the only hard thing I was on was heroin, and I wasn't smoking, I was IV. So I knew as soon as I saw that what it was, and I also knew for a fact that that was not mine. Like I said out loud 3 or 4 times, that's not mine. That's not mine. I don't know why you're bringing it in here because that's not mine. That was the only thing I said to the police.
And that was in reference to the crack?
The crack pipes and like paraphernalia for harder drugs than marijuana.
And you didn't use, I'm assuming you didn't use crack?
No, not at all. I've never even tried crack. I've tried just about everything under the sun, but crack and meth are two of the ones that I'll never touch, you know?
That's good. With meth, you wouldn't have those pretty teeth.
Well, thank you.
Let's talk about they come in, they kick in the door, they take drugs out, they come back, they plant additional drugs, and then they take you to jail, right?
Yes, they took me to jail, and at the time, it was just somehow a misdemeanor charge when I got arrested. And then the judge upped the charges tremendously after I had gotten bailed out before my court date.
Was it the judge or the prosecutor? Because usually it's the prosecutor.
Probably the prosecutor. I'm sorry, I don't know all the lingo and terminology.
The district attorney decides what to charge people with. Even if the police arrest you for one thing, the district attorney's office can come in and review the file and decide to charge you with a more serious crime than arrested for or a less serious crime than arrested for.
I take that back. I wasn't charged with a misdemeanor. I was charged with felony possession of marijuana because it was just over half an ounce. It was like 0.1 grams over half an ounce, and they charged me with a felony. And then they upped the charges. I remembered that because I was thinking a $3,000 bond isn't right for a misdemeanor. My dad and my grandparents came and got me out of jail that night, $3,000 bond, and I went home, started that night packing all my trash, throwing everything away, and getting ready because I knew I was going to get evicted. So I got bailed out, and then one of the teachers at my mom's school, my mom worked at an elementary school, she was married to a lawyer, and Chris Malcolm is his name. If you're in Alabama and you need a defense attorney, I recommend him 10 out of 10.
What's his name?
Christopher Malcolm.
Christopher Malcolm. That's a cool name, too.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a very lawyerly name.
When you first go meet Mr. Malcolm, did you have any doubts or fears that were, controlling your mind?
Nope. Not at all.
You were calm?
I was pretty nervous, but at the same time, this man has gotten people off of death row. So he has won, capital cases. And I knew when he looked at my file and he told his wife that he would take the case, because he was pretty busy at the time, and he took the case as a favor to my mom. When he looked at the file and he said he could win it easy, I had no doubt. My faith was through the roof just because of his history and his record. He has won more cases than he's lost by a long shot. He has been just top notch with everyone I know that has used him. When I sat down in his office, he asked my parents to leave so he could just talk to me. We talked and he told me that he was going to take care of it, but I just had to sit down and shut up and not say a word. He told me they were going to really ramp up the pressure. And then about a week later is when he called me and told me that they had turned up the charges from just felony possession to felony trafficking of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute to minors within a school zone.
So they just made all these allegations up with respect to, I guess, because you were next door to a school?
Right. We were next door to a school, and we had our pot in 3 different bags because we had bought 3 different quarter ounces the last time we picked up, and they were 3 different kinds. So we didn't mix them all together in the jar. We had them in a jar in 3 separate bags, and they happened to still have quarter ounce written on the Ziploc. So they got us for trafficking because they could.
Part of me thinks that they probably knew you guys were not really drug dealers, but it's just to make a splash. And truly that's not right, but honestly it probably happens way more than any of us would even realize. And I do this kind of work. I'm still shocked sometimes with what is done. by those who are supposed to be enforcing the laws. They break them as much as they enforce them.
Well, it was an election year, and the judge made it very obvious that she was going to make an example of us somehow. The judge didn't really give us any leniency, and she crammed everything in. Everything moved so fast. Most people, you hear their legal battles take months to years. This was over and done in 3 months.
Total from start to finish?
From start to finish, 3 months.
I have never
Yeah.
seen that in my almost 18 years as a lawyer. I have never seen a felony case anyway be over in 3 months.
I got arrested September 4th, 2015, and my court date was November 7th. So it all moved quick. They actually were trying to get it at the end of September, but my lawyer pushed it back because he didn't have everything prepared. He was able to get an extension. The whole thing happened very rapidly.
Do you recall what evidence the prosecution initially presented to your lawyer?
I do not. It's been a long time, and there's a lot of pot in between then and now, so my memory on it is on the fine details are pretty slim. But I know they brought forth like the paraphernalia as evidence. That was one of the big things, that I had so much paraphernalia. And then the other thing was the weed in labeled bags. That was like their driving thing, and the fact that we owned a scale.
Okay, a food scale, right?
Yeah, a food scale.
Anytime they arrest somebody and there's like a drop of anything, and if there's a scale in the house, that's now drug paraphernalia. I have a scale in my kitchen and it's for weighing food.
Yeah.
But if they find a scale, the drugs can be upstairs and the scale can be in the kitchen, and they'll still take the scale and say it's drug paraphernalia.
Yeah, and I mean, there was no denying this was drug paraphernalia. It was with our drugs. So, I mean, it was not because we were selling, it was because we were checking to make sure we weren't getting ripped off, because we had been getting ripped off by someone that we were buying from. So, we eventually just went to the corner store, picked up a $2 scale just to drop our grams on it and make sure that everything was as it was supposed to be. It was just such a shit show, dude. Like, the whole thing was just one thing after another, and it was all bullshit.
How about witnesses against you? Were there any star witnesses the state had?
Nope.
Just the anonymous caller? That's it?
Yep. So when the court date came, Chris went up. I didn't even have to testify. Chris went up and talked to the judge, and the judge sent me for a drug test. And then I got called back into the chambers, and she sat me down and told me that she was going to make it stay on my record until I got it expunged, but otherwise she was dropping the charges.
So, what did your lawyer do? Christopher Malcolm, I'll never forget that name. What did he do to tear apart the prosecution's case against you?
He got me off on the technicalities of them not photographing the evidence and following proper chain of custody because that one officer had turned on his body cam. All the rest of them had switched their body cams off after they came into the house. My neighbor turned his back on and recorded them removing the evidence without photographing it.
Do you think he did that to help you?
I do. I 100% think he did it to help me. The other big thing he used to help me get the charges dropped was that I repeatedly asked for a female officer when they told me I had to change clothes, and they refused me a female officer. They made me change in front of 3 male officers in a room with the door shut.
Oh, wow.
And I was very uncomfortable with that because I have had sexual assault in my past. And it wasn't like they even turned their backs. They stood there and watched me and made comments. It was awful. It was one of the most humiliating things I had ever been through.
Were those 3 officers disciplined or fired?
They were.
All 3 of them?
Yes.
Your neighbor, he was fired or reassigned?
He was reassigned to a different area. I was told that he was let go / moved / reassigned. Every person that told me about it told me something different. I just know that he was no longer there. I went to drop off a thank you card for him for, recording everything and for helping me where he could, but he didn't even show up to the court date. He was gone by then and he couldn't make the court date. He just got moved elsewhere, or he did move elsewhere, or he got fired and left the state or something. I don't know what happened to him, but I know he is no longer with the Florence PD.
That's always amazing to me when an officer chooses to do the right thing. There's repercussions. I actually represented a police officer who, according to his own testimony, he refused to tell a lie. So we had a murder trial. Well, my law partner and another lawyer had a murder trial. And that officer was asked in that prior murder trial to change his story. He refused to do it.
No
Well,
way.
he refused to lie. That case proceeded to trial. My law partner's client at the time was found not guilty. About 3 months after that, this same officer was arrested and charged with armed robbery for running a drug dealer out of his neighborhood. So he went to trial, and in Louisiana, the penalty for armed robbery is up to 99 years in prison.
Wow.
He went to trial. It was my law partner and myself represented him, and he was found not guilty. That was the end of his law enforcement career. I mean, he simply was doing the right thing. He paid dearly. Well, he almost paid dearly. We were able to save his life, but his career in law enforcement was over. Honestly, he didn't want it anymore after that. Did your lawyer go out and hire any experts, private investigators, or anybody else to help in the case?
No, he said he didn't need to. He said from the first meeting that from what he had seen, it was cut and dry and he would have it dropped as soon as possible. And he delivered. He went into the courtroom, he got up, he talked to the judge at the bar, and then she sent me for a drug test and then came back and dismissed it. After they had trumped up the charges and all that, she said it was excessive and she let us go. It was me and one of my roommates that got arrested. And one of the things I left out is that she rolled. As soon as they got her in the cop car, she sang like a canary and she put everything on me. She, meanwhile, went on acting like she hadn't said a word. The only person she told that she squealed was her lawyer, and her lawyer didn't tell my lawyer. And we found out when her charges were dismissed about 3 weeks before the court date.
Let me ask you this, because this happens a lot. Was everything for you, or was some of it for her as well?
Oh, most of it was split evenly between like 6, 7 people. They tried to get me to roll on my other roommates. She just pinned everything on me because her boyfriend was one of the other roommates and she didn't want to get him in trouble. And I refused to talk. So they just put everything on me because I wouldn't squeal on my roommates or become a CI and pin all my dealers. That's what they wanted. Originally, they said, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, then, we won't charge you at all. We'll drop all your charges immediately.
Take me to that moment. You're in court. Your lawyer goes to the bench. He comes back, tells you, we're done. The case is going to be dismissed. How did that feel? What was going through your mind at the time?
I felt good. It was like I could breathe again because I was looking at 20 to 25 years. I was 19. My life would have been over. For half an ounce of pot. That's all they found was the pot. They didn't find anything else. They actually gave up searching because the dogs kept alerting everywhere because there was so much paraphernalia. They took the dogs out and told us just to throw the rest of it away whenever we cleaned out the apartment. It was really vindicating and it felt really, really good. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders.
Any tears? Any hugs?
I gave him a big old hug. I don't remember if I cried or not. I don't think I cried because I had taken my anxiety medicine beforehand, so I didn't have a panic attack, thankfully. It was like this moment of, all right, you said you were going to do it, and you did it.
Let me ask you, if you remember, how much did it cost for a lawyer of that caliber?
$5,000 for the whole thing.
For the whole thing. People are always trying to negotiate a lawyer's fee down, and I always tell people there's some lawyer who will charge you less than I will. I can't beat their price, but we're probably not offering the same service.
And, he did give us a discounted rate because he knew our family and he knew our circumstances. And he also knew that I wasn't trafficking heroin. He knew that I wasn't into that kind of stuff. He knew that I was just using because I was honest with him. I mean, that's like my number one thing is honesty. If I'm in a situation where I need to be honest with somebody, like completely honest, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm not going to backpedal. I'm just going to tell it how it is because they're trying to help me. Why would I lie?
Well, I wish We could put that on a postcard. I tell clients all the time, if it happened the way you say it happened, we are going to be in a pretty good position. But also, if you tell me the truth, that's actually going to put me in the best position to be able to help you. If you lie to me, I'm just running with your lie and it's going to be
Right.
exposed. So just tell your lawyer the truth and let him or her figure out how to help you based on the facts.
That was what seemed like the most logical thing to me in the moment. It paid off.
Based on what you experienced and what you endured, what kind of changes do you think need to happen when it comes to our criminal justice system here in this country?
Accountability. There needs to be like 1,000 times more accountability for officers. Body cams should not be allowed to be turned off on a call. I believe that body cams should be on the entire time an officer is on duty, regardless of if they're responding to a call or not. Another thing is that weed needs to be decriminalized everywhere. It honestly needs to be legalized, but I would take decriminalized because it's still illegal in Alabama.
It's still illegal in Louisiana without a prescription. You can't go to the dispensary if you get a script and get it legally.
There are no dispensaries because the state is piddling around and not opening them because they don't really want them in the state.
I remember talking to this lady who she got a prescription for medical marijuana, and the lady was telling me how she was on medicine for anxiety, depression, arthritis, I think gout, and just like a host of different metabolic conditions. And she was like, look, I'm taking all these pills and now all I need is marijuana. So it's kind of absurd that the government knows this stuff has real medicinal value and they won't legalize it. I mean, not even decriminalize it. Like, it should be legal. Worse shit happens when people are drunk on alcohol than when people are high on marijuana.
Absolutely. And I mean, it is federally legal, but it's just on a state by state basis where the states need to get it together. And right now, with the 2018 Farm Bill that legalized hemp everywhere and hemp based cannabinoids, weed is basically legal here now. You can go to any gas station and buy a dab pen. You can go anywhere you want, and buy flour. I smoke concentrates at this point, but it's coming under fire again because our state legislature is actively trying to ban all hemp derived cannabinoids except CBD.
Nobody's listening to what the constituents want, the public.
And my personal theory is that they're doing this to drive more people to medical marijuana when they release it because no one will buy medical at the high price point if you can go to the gas station down the road and get it for $10.
I think medical marijuana is one thing. They want to drive the public to that, but the other one is to feed the prison population.
Absolutely. We're building a new, I think it's 13, 14 million. Let me look it up real quick. We're building a new prison. The new Elmore County prison in Alabama estimated to cost over $1 billion to build and equip.
How much?
Over $1 billion with a B. We are spending right now on a new prison in Alabama, and they've got to fund it somehow. So why not fund it with people who shouldn't be in jail? Why not keep that free labor?
I'm sure Alabama has a lot of more pressing needs for that $1 billion investment other than a prison.
Absolutely. We could use it for our education system. We could use it on our roads. We could use it for any number of things. But no, let's build a new prison.
If you look at, this is what I always tell people, we have like an example. Look at Colorado. They completely legalized it. They fund their school system with the proceeds, and they have amazing schools. And I do believe that that would be true for a great number of states.
I do too.
Legalize it and tax it.
Absolutely. And I don't mind paying the taxes on it. It's not safe to buy it on the street anymore. I know people that have overdosed on fentanyl on weed that has been handled near it, then, used in edibles or something like that and ingested and died.
It's on everything. I tell people, you have to be, you might as well play Russian roulette if you're going to buy drugs off the street in today's world. I've seen marijuana dealers, and they've only ever dealt with marijuana in their entire professional drug dealing careers and have been in trouble in recent years because this marijuana now has fentanyl in it. So, but if we legalize it, we can control that. We can regulate it. We can tax it. We can do all that. So if somebody just wants to buy marijuana, they're getting marijuana. They're not getting marijuana laced with fentanyl or something else that's killing people left and right.
Right. And the other thing is, just think about how many businesses it's going to drive out. There's a smoke shop on every corner here, and their main product is Delta 8, THCA, THCP, Delta 10, all those cannabinoids. So, what's going to happen to those businesses when hemp is outlawed? They're going to close.
Yeah, they don't have a choice. They gotta close or go to jail.
It hits close to home for me because, my husband manages gas stations. That's one of their biggest profit items. I mean, yeah, they sell vapes and they have a lot of high profit margin items, but the cannabis products are the highest profit margin item for them. So that and beer.
I always tell people humans have been using drugs as long as there have been humans. When the Native Americans were smoking a peace pipe, those were drugs. When my ancestors in Africa were talking to their ancestors that died before them, they were using mind altering substances.
Yeah,
So the reality is, humans will always use drugs. We really need to legalize stuff that's really not bad. Like marijuana is really, I don't see any problems with marijuana. That should be legal. Now, meth, fentanyl, heroin, those things need to be taken off the market because they're taking people out. And look, save money. Stop chasing people who use marijuana and spend your money, time, and resources on going after the hardcore drugs that are really hurting people.
absolutely. And I kind of feel the same way that you do, only I take it a little bit further. I believe that everything should be decriminalized for possession, and it should only be distribution that is prosecuted of like harder substances. Marijuana shouldn't count. Psychedelic mushrooms shouldn't count. I'm talking, heroin, fentanyl, meth, cocaine, stuff like that. You should be still penalized for distributing, but we should instead use the money that we would invest in, prosecuting these people for harm reduction and safe use and education, because education is the number one thing that helps people get sober. Until they know what the risks are and until they know what they're doing to themselves and until they know and hear that they have to change it, they're not going to change. And it takes education and, harm reduction to make those things happen. So I think, if we, instead of building a new prison, built a new state funded rehab facility.
That makes a lot of sense. That'll actually help people. Prison doesn't help people. Actually, there's drugs in prison. They go to prison and the guards bring drugs in and they still get drugs.
I have a couple friends in prison. I actually have a friend on death row in North Carolina, and he told me a couple weeks ago, actually, we were talking about this, and he said, it's just crazy. It's easier for me to get drugs here than it ever was on the street.
And he's on death row, supposedly secluded and isolated from the general population.
He's been there 20 years.
Wow. You would have been 7 when he went.
I met him when I was 16 years old. I went to high school with one of his sister. Meeting him completely changed my outlook on capital punishment. Meeting him is what radicalized me, honestly. Because up until that point, I was very, pro death penalty. If you're doing something, you deserve to go to prison. But then I met him and I was like, he doesn't deserve to die for a mistake he made when he was 19. Like, yes,
19?
he was 19 years old. He was involved in an altercation and he took someone's life. And if the person had not been who the person was, he would have gotten life or 25 years. But unfortunately, because of the person, their profession, he was charged capitally.
So he killed one person?
One person in an altercation.
What was the person's?
The person was a police officer. If it hadn't been a police officer, he would not have gotten the death penalty, which is absurd. You have to treat it fairly. You can't show favoritism. It doesn't matter what someone's profession is. Their life is equally as valuable as anyone else's. So if you're going to prosecute Joe Schmo, who shot a crackhead down the road, and give him 20 years, then I feel like that should be pretty fair. He didn't wake up that morning and go, oh boy, I'm going to go out and I'm going to shoot me a cop today. He was stopped, and the cop was using undue force, if I remember correctly, and an altercation ensued, and he got hold of his gun and he shot him. And then he ran away. And I'm not excusing what he did, but he doesn't deserve to die for that.
No, I actually agree with you. I'm not in favor of the death penalty at all, really. Now, I will say this. When there's somebody who has killed, like the serial killers that have killed a great number of people, I'm not really opposed to death being sought for them. But when somebody has a momentary breakdown and does something completely out of character, I don't think they should get the death penalty. In fact, here in Louisiana, if you kill somebody and you're charged with second degree murder, penalty for second degree murder in Louisiana is mandatory life without parole. And the penalty for manslaughter is up to 40 years in prison. So if you have like a crazy fight one night and you stab somebody or shoot somebody, I guess you're lucky if they charge you with manslaughter because you're only looking at 40 years. If they really want to come after you, they just charge you with second degree murder and a conviction. That's it. You go to prison and you never leave. And I'm completely opposed to that. I don't think it's fair. I understand like somebody dies. I've had family members murdered, so I know what that feels like. In fact, I've had 3 family members murdered in like the last 5 years.
I'm so sorry.
Yep. One was my first cousin, who I was extremely close to, and 2 were my first cousin's sons.
Oh, man. I'm so sorry.
When somebody lives their life and they like go through life and they're old and they're sick, they pass away, it's not a big deal for me. Like, I'll give you an example. When my mom passed away about 5 years ago, I spoke at her funeral. I did not cry. My cousin Corey, who was murdered, I attempted to speak at his funeral, and I broke down. Like, I could not get it out. And I speak in front of people and crowds every day, and I could not keep it together at his funeral. And his mom told me afterwards, she was like, I've never seen you like that. And I was like, I've never seen me like that either. But I couldn't hold it together. But then last year, one of my aunts passed away. She was a triplet. My aunt, my mom, and one of my uncles were triplets.
Wow.
I spoke at my aunt's funeral. I did not cry. Well, 1 week later, my first cousin's son was murdered. And I sat in that funeral and I cried the entire damn time. Because he was a young boy, 22, 23 years old. And like he hadn't even really experienced life. That's all I could think about. It's like when my mom, my aunt, they passed away, they lived a full life. They, got to experience life. But look, I don't know about you, but at 23, you haven't really lived.
You haven't. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I know when my grandma almost passed back last June, we were actively planning her funeral while she was in the hospital and trying to get everything in order because they had told us, call the family, she's about to die. And I was weirdly okay with it.
That's not weird.
Because, like, she's 78 years old, she's lived a full life, she's had a good life, and now she doesn't have much quality of life. I would rather her pass on to her reward than stay here and suffer.
I always tell people there's a difference between being alive and living.
Yes.
My grandmother, I was 17 when she passed away. And she was so sick that I remember I felt guilty. Like, she used to lay in her bed and she would be like, Lord, come see about me. Like, I would hear her in the middle of the night, Lord, come see about me. Because she was in a lot of pain. So when she passed away, I didn't go to school for a week and I cried. But I was relieved, if that makes sense.
It does.
I was relieved. So I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, we don't want to see them suffer, especially if they've lived their life.
Right. My other grandmother passed from multiple myeloma, and the night she died, my grandfather cried, my father cried, but really everyone else in the house that night was just relieved. It had been a very long 3 days of her throwing up blood and just not being conscious. Everybody was just so relieved that she was finally done suffering. She had been suffering for about 5 years at that point. It was just relief. So I definitely understand where you're coming from there.
So if someone is watching this episode of my podcast and they're accused of a crime, in your opinion, what should they do first?
Shut your mouth and call a lawyer.
And if they're in Alabama, who should they call?
Chris Malcolm.
Chris Malcolm.
If you're anywhere near Lawrence County, Morgan County, North Alabama, call Chris Malcolm. He is your man with a plan.
Thank you once again. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for having me on.
This could not happen if there were not people like you willing to come on and tell their stories. A lot of times people are just too embarrassed to let it out. But look, letting it out is a good thing. The public needs to know what is happening to other members of the public. I do believe that until it happens to most people, until their rights are violated, trampled, ignored, they don't think it's going to happen to them. They think, oh, it only happens to bad people. It can happen to any of us.
Yeah, it happens to anybody. And, know your rights and just listen to your lawyer. They went to school for this. They know more about it than you do, so listen to them.
I need you to come talk to some of my clients.
All right, I'll come in there and hit them with it.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this, and I will keep you posted and updated when the episode drops.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
All right, you have a good evening.